Hurricane season is here. So if you've got any ideas of purchasing a home before the end of the year, here are a few things that are going to keep your closing from going off the rails. Okay, so the first problem you'll run into when either a hurricane or tropical storm comes through the state of Florida is the box. The box is more like a rectangle. It's about 16,000 square miles. And what it does is it keeps insurance agencies from binding insurance to your policy and to your home during the time that the storm passes over. Now, that's going to cause problems because it can stop closings and it can leave you without coverage during that gap. So that's going to be one of the big issues that you'll run into is that box that comes up during a storm. One of the other things you're going to find is that during a hurricane, you're going to see that your appraisal is not going to be able to get done because the appraiser is not going to come out during the hurricane or before the hurricane. He's going to wait until afterwards to make sure that there's no damage. If you've got inspections scheduled, they're probably going to go ahead and cancel those. And you may find that if you've got a loan in process, that may stop too, because a lot of times during a hurricane, everything shuts down. Especially if it's a bigger hurricane, everything pretty much shuts down. So those are some of the things that can happen that can really cause a lot of delays. And I'll tell you a story in a minute about what happened with one of my customers and how that affected their closing. The next thing is property damage. There's a risk of property damage in any storm, whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane. And because there's a risk of property damage, you could be required to have a reinspection or even a reappraisal, and maybe even make some repairs before the whole thing is done. So if you're a buyer, you may have to request repairs being made to the home. That's going to considerably increase the chances of that closing not actually happening. Now, what happened with me with one of my customers is a hurricane came through, and it wasn't like a Category 5. It was like a Category 3, but it came through the state, and it did a lot of wind damage. And unfortunately for my buyer, we had 6 different deals all locked together. So they had an offer on a house, and they were selling their house through me, and they were buying this house through me, of course. And then they had the buyer for their home was locked into a deal with somebody else, and it kind of daisy chained with 6 different deals, different closings, all meshed together in kind of a big daisy chain. And so what ended up happening was I, as my buyer's representative, ended up spending a lot of time talking to all of the different agents and all of the different lenders and trying to make sure that everything was, we were communicating well and that everybody was on board. But it was kind of touch and go. And only one of those deals, if just one of them would have backed out because of the situation, or if damage was done and they couldn't move forward, everything would have fallen apart. Now, we managed to get the whole thing done, but it was an effort on everybody's part. It was crazy. And so you want to be making sure that you have the right people working with you, that you know that the people that are going to be working with you are going to communicate well with each other, and that, that at the end of the day, everybody is working towards the same goal. Most of the time that's the case, but sometimes it's not. And you want to make sure that you understand the process so that when these things come up, especially during hurricane season, you're prepared for it. If you're considering making a move to Florida, especially the Central Florida, Tampa Bay area, down into Sarasota, Manatee, up into Orlando, let me know. I can answer any questions you have. I can definitely help you kind of figure out what areas you want to move into. All my information is in the description below, or you can contact me through my Calendly link, which is talkwithvince.com. All right, now the next thing is separate wind and flood insurance policies may be required. A lot of times in the state of Florida, we like to do what's called a wind mitigation when we're doing a 4-point inspection. The wind mitigation basically says that the roof is in fantastic condition and can stand up against anything that nature throws against it. And then, you also have the problem with higher deductibles when a storm comes through. Of course, the insurance companies are going to gouge you. No matter how you look at it, they're going to gouge you. So when a storm comes through, they're going to do their best to make that extra. And so, you may have extra charges. You may have flood insurance demands. You may have longer waiting periods to apply for insurance. It all gets kind of crazy during a storm. Now, when it comes to negotiating, timing, repairs, all of that, everything becomes very uncertain and everybody is stressed out. The buyer's stressed out, the seller is stressed out. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. The buyers are concerned that there's going to be additional damage from the storm. The sellers are concerned that they're not going to be able to get their home sold. And so the agent and the title company and the lenders are all trying to kind of make it happen, but everybody's kind of freaking out a little bit. And the more severe the storm is, the more the freak out happens. And so, you want to be aware that this is going to be a stressful period when a storm comes in. Now, aside from, being in that box for insurance coverage and having a storm move through, tropical storms are really not the biggest issue. The hurricanes are, of course. But aside from that, if you're in hurricane season and you're looking at making a purchase, it's not a bad thing to do to make a purchase during hurricane season, because during hurricane season, it's our biggest rainy season. So if there are issues with flooding, issues with the roof, leaking, anything like that, you're going to be able to determine that simply because you'll be able to visibly see it. You go out to a showing after a really hard rain and you're going to see where standing water is. You go into a house and you look at the ceiling and you're looking for wet spots, you're looking for stains, you're looking for anything that's going to help you to understand whether or not there's going to be issues with the roof. The other thing too is, as you're looking at homes, if the roof is more than 10 years old, used to be more than 5, but now insurance companies have kind of gotten a little bit stricter. If the roof is more than 10 years old, we may have to negotiate from the very beginning to either get a credit for the roof and have a new roof put on, or take some money away so that you can afford to put a roof on later, and still be able to get insurance. So there's a lot of things that have to be dealt with, and rainy seasons are kind of some of the best times to actually look at homes, because the flaws, as far as a Florida home, the flaws are going to be there. You're going to be able to see them. And then the other thing that you can look at doing to mitigate some of this is bind your insurance early. So you've got an offer on a home, the offer's been accepted. You want to start talking to the insurance company right after all of the repairs have been negotiated. Now remember, when it comes to the state of Florida, every home is sold as is with the right to inspect. So that means that you can have an inspector go out. The seller doesn't necessarily have to fix anything, but it always behooves them to do the best that they can if they've got a really good buyer. And so if you're a really good buyer, they're going to be willing to negotiate some repairs. During that inspection period, the repairs don't have to be made. They just have to be negotiated. Once those repairs are negotiated and you and the seller are on board with what you want to have done and what they're willing to do for you, that would be a good time, even before your appraisal, to go ahead and bind your insurance so that you've got it started. If the appraisal doesn't come in and we've got to negotiate through that, or if the deal falls apart, no harm, no foul. You're not going to be paying anything for that. But by binding your insurance early, you're already ready to do what you've got to do as time moves forward towards closing after the appraisal. And that's going to help minimize, any kind of disruptions in the closing by doing it early. And just remember that during hurricane season, people are always going to be a little trepidatious about how things are going to work out. And so when the stress gets high, the best thing you can do is take a deep breath, settle down, and start thinking in terms of how can I get ahead of all of this. Your agent should be able to help you with that. I do the best that I can to try to help my customers get ahead of all of this so that you don't want to be stressed to the point of like having to wake up in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., sweating and worrying about it. But you want to just be aware of it. And my job as your agent is to help you get through this with the least possible stress that we can muster. So when you start to look at buying a home during the hurricane season, just remember that there are going to be hurdles, and those hurdles can be overcome if you're paying attention. All right, guys, have a great one.